भावयामि रघुरामं भव्यसुगुणारामं भावयामि रघुरामं भव्यसुगुणारामं भावुकवितरणवरामङ्गलीला लसितं सरे ग सरि मा पद पद रे सा नि ध नि ध प म ग रे सा ध सा रे म ग.
Hello and welcome back to Raaga Rasika. This is a podcast program that explores the world of Carnatic music. Joining me from Albany, New York is Vidya Subramanian. Last time we were talking about Shruti and its special relevance to Carnatic music. Today we would like to talk about an instrument that it comes in really handy when we talk about Shruti. In fact, Vidya, whenever you've been singing in our segments, you've played an instrument in the background, and you've referred to it in the past as a Shruti box. So what is it?
The background instrument that I use in our sessions, or for that matter in a concert or any music performance, is an electronic tambura. It's basically an instrument that guides me with my pitch when I sing. And, in Western terms, I would say it is like a drone instrument.
So Vidya, tell us a little bit about this instrument. What does this look like?
The electronic tambura that we use today is basically a small rectangular box. It's very easy to actually miss it on the concert stage because it's quite compact looking and it looks like a tape recorder or some such thing. And it has a number of knobs or buttons that help the artist tune it to the right pitch or Shruti.
Interesting. So Vidya, when you teach Carnatic music, do you use the Shruti box for even beginners, or is this something that is typically used for advanced artists of Carnatic music?
That's an excellent question. In fact, this is something that most teachers would emphasize to students right from their first lesson. So as far as Carnatic music is concerned, you are advised and encouraged to practice with the drone instrument, either the Shruti box or the tambura, right from day one. Because sustaining the Shruti or the pitch is one of the most fundamental skills that a singer or an instrumentalist needs to acquire. And unless you practice with a Shruti box, it is very, very difficult to develop that skill. So I do definitely recommend all students, whether they are beginners or more advanced level students, to use a tambura or a Shruti box to guide them as they practice. Having said that, there are basically two different subcategories, as you can see. The first one being the electronic Shruti box, that is more handy to use for people who are yet to develop a fine sense of Shruti. So if you're a beginner and you're not quite sure about how to tune your instrument or how to match your voice to the Shruti, then I would say you go in for a Shruti box, especially an electronic Shruti box, because it's much handier and easier to use than a manual one. So in the Shruti box, basically the sa and pa, or in the case of some songs, the sa and ma, would be tuned to match that particular pitch in which you're going to sing at, and you will be able to hear the sa and pa together in one continuous tone. Let's listen to a snippet from a Shruti box. Please notice how you can hear the sa and pa together in the same tone. And this particular Shruti box has been tuned to a pitch of 1 or orukattai, also known as C on the Western scale.
When I heard that snippet, Vidya, the one thing that immediately jumped at me was that it is quite different from what I hear you play in the background when you sing and you turn on your Shruti box. So what is the difference here?
Basically, what I use here for our sessions as well as in all my performances is what is called an electronic tambura. So it's a much more sophisticated instrument than a Shruti box. And it's basically trying to replicate a manual tambura, which is that classic drone instrument that we use in traditional Carnatic concerts. Let me play a snippet from my electronic tambura. So you can see that unlike the Shruti box snippet that we listened to, this is not one monotonous tone, but we have 4 notes that are being heard. Pa, sa, 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 pa, sa, sa, sa. So that's how the electronic tambura goes. And basically it is designed to approximate the way a real tambura is structured.
Tell us about a traditional tambura. And if I were at a concert and an artist is using a traditional tambura, what would it look like?
The traditional tambura is a wooden stringed instrument. It has a round pot-like base with a long neck. It's quite similar, I would say, to the veena if you have seen one, except the veena has a second smaller pot at one end which is absent from the tambura, and also the veena has frets to facilitate the playing of music. But the tambura itself only has the open strings, and it's used as a harmonic accompaniment in a concert. So you really don't play any songs on the tambura, but you just use it as a drone or pitch instrument. There are 4 strings that are present in the tambura. The first string is tuned to pa, which is the 5th note from your fundamental. The middle 2 strings are tuned to the octave of the fundamental. So that would be the higher shadjam or higher sa to your fundamental sa. And the last string, it will look a little different. It's a thicker string and it is tuned to the fundamental.
So Vidya, are there different types of tamburas?
There are basically 2 different types of tamburas that seem to be in vogue today. The first one is the traditional Thanjavur tambura that is more prevalent in the south, and the second type is the Meeraj style tambura, which is probably favored by the Hindustani performers, but it is also becoming increasingly popular in South Indian classical concerts as well. The Meeraj tambura usually has a slightly bigger pot in the bottom and a wider trunk. They essentially perform the same function, they just look a little bit different. Interestingly, the pot of the Meeraj tambura, I believe, is made from dried gourd. So it is a very delicate instrument, it breaks quite easily. That's probably why it's slightly more tricky to carry it around. Unlike the Thanjavur tambura, which is entirely made out of a solid block of wood.
So Vidya, I'm sure you have used a traditional tambura in the past, and you use the electronic tambura more often these days. In your professional opinion, how closely do these 2 resemble in terms of their tonal attributes? Or is there something still missing in the electronic tambura as compared to the traditional one?
Today's models of the electronic tambura are excellent in terms of trying to replicate and match the tonal attributes of the regular tambura. However, there are certain subtle nuances in a traditional tambura that the electronic tambura probably can never hope to match. The first point I would say is the absence of the traditional pot that really helps with the resonance. The electronic tambura, as we can see, is a much smaller instrument. So you don't really have the room for resonating the sound as in a traditional tambura. So they try to replicate it with electronics, but it's usually not quite the same. The second and very important attribute in a traditional tambura that I would say is missing in the electronic version is the principle of jiva. Jiva in Sanskrit refers to soul. Basically, the jiva in a tambura is what really gives it its life. If you look closely at a picture of a tambura, you will notice a small bridge in the front portion of the pot at the base of the tambura. In fact, I have a picture of myself with a tambura in my website. The strings of the tambura are usually held quite tight. They are made to pass over this bridge. At the point where the strings meet the bridge, woolen threads are generally inserted. And what we do is we kind of move those woolen threads up and down the bridge until at a particular point you will hear a very special overtone rich sound. And that is really like a buzzing sound in which particular harmonics will resonate with focused clarity. And that's really what we term as the jiva in a tambura. Until today, we have not been able to match that quality in the electronic version. Now let's listen to a snippet from a regular traditional tambura.
fascinating, Vidya. One can easily sense the additional richness that a traditional tambura provides, which I think what you're referring to is the jiva. So, Vidya, before we finish this episode, let's spend a couple of minutes talking about the traditional tambura artist. If you go to a concert here in the US, it's quite rare for us to actually see a traditional tambura. Is that true in India? At least when I was growing up, I have seen several artists using a traditional tambura in concerts. I wonder if this is a sort of a tradition that is fading away or not. Give us your thoughts.
As you rightly observed, if you live outside India, it's not so common to find a traditional tambura being used in a concert. And I think the main reason being that it's quite bulky to carry. You need to have the right set of strings. Even if there is a local host family that is willing to provide you with a tambura, sometimes they may not have the right set of strings to match your pitch and so on. However, in my opinion, in India, the tambura tradition is still very much alive, at least in professional level concerts. It is generally not considered acceptable if you don't have a traditional tambura in the background. And very often, many musicians use both the electronic as well as the traditional tamburas concurrently on the concert platform. However, the electronic tambura is being increasingly used for practicing at home, again, mainly for convenience purposes. There is also the tradition of the tambura artist. The tambura artist has been traditionally included as part of the concert team. And most of these tambura artists are simply lovers of music who have devoted their time and energies to learning how to tune a tambura. They're usually very dedicated and committed people who do this almost entirely out of love for music. They play the tambura in the background, enjoy the concert, and they're usually quite adept at making subtle changes to suit the song that is being rendered or played. For example, if the song is in a ragam which doesn't have the panchamam, most tambura artists are sensitive enough to not play the panchamam string and they would just play the shadjam and so on. They are usually given a lot of respect, and it's definitely a tradition that we should continue and encourage for the future generations as well.
So, Vidya, in your electronic tambura, when you're singing a raga that does not have pa, how do you handle that?
In the electronic tambura, it's fairly easy to make these adjustments. Typically, we have a button for pa, a button for ma, and one for ni. Ni is something we don't generally use in Carnatic music, but I believe it's used quite frequently in Hindustani music. So if you're singing a ragam which doesn't have pa, all you need to do is to switch off the pa button and just play the sa. Or if you're singing a song where you want to turn on your ma, you just have to press that particular button. So now I'm going to provide 3 illustrations of some slightly different tuning in the tambura. In the first illustration, we will have the standard setting where we have the pa button turned on. So let me play that. Pa sa 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 pa sa sa sa. So this was the standard setting. Now imagine I'm singing a song in a ragam which has no pa. So I would turn off the pa setting and all you would hear would be the 3 sa strings. Sa 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 sa. In the third illustration, I'm going to turn on the ma button. So this is typically used for songs which have a limited range. Ma sa 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 ma sa sa sa.
Interesting. So, Vidya, let's stop here and pick up next time on Raaga Rasika. Thank you, Vidya, for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Hope you join us next time on another episode of Raaga Rasika. To learn more about Vidya, visit her online at vidyasubramanian.com or write to us at www.raagarasika.com. That's RAAGARASIKA.com. Thank you. Goodbye.
नवरत्न मण्डपे विचित्र मणिमय सिंहासने सीतया सह संस्थित सुचरित्र परम पवित्र गुरु गुहमित्र पंकज